Welcome everyone to this CPC Intelligent Building Group webinar. I'm very sorry for the delay. We had a today technical problems opening the large file. And today we are very fortunate to have a presenter to talk about what is artificial intelligence when it comes to architecture. So we have Dr. Danyal Ahmed. Danyal is a licensed architect affiliated with Architectural Institute of Japan. He obtained a PhD in Japan. Her dissertation research topic is critical analysis of emerging technologies. And he also presented in one of the TED talk organized by Tohoku University. So now all the screen is yours, Danyal.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah,
okay?
We can.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Clemens Krum and Dr. Singh for inviting me to this wonderful opportunity. And let me introduce myself very briefly. I did my PhD in architecture and building sciences from Tohoku University that I completed last year in September 2021. And my specialism, subfield, or you can say major, was history, theory, and criticism of the emerging technology of artificial intelligence and its relevance to architecture. So this is my specialism. And about this presentation, just a very brief introduction that when I was a student at Tohoku University from 2017 to 2021, in the very start, I started gathering some very, because artificial intelligence was in much talk back then in Japan and right now also. So I started gathering a lot of ideas and started writing about them. So it took me 2 years to publish these 3 papers that I'm going to discuss today with all of you. And what I can say is these 3 papers were being rejected again and again by multiple journals, academic journals. And they were saying that they do not publish this kind of research. And then one night in Japan, and it was, UK was like, Japan is ahead 9 hours. It was 2 a.m. at night. And when I contacted Intelligent Buildings International Journal, Professor Cedric Price, and fortunately within 5 minutes he answered and he said that yes, after 14 rejections, he said that yes, our journal will be publishing the research, and that was a very kind of a exhilarating moment for me. So after 2.5 years, my very first paper came in print, and then my second and third with the same journal, and then with the rest of the 2 papers that I published with the leading journal in Japan. So this is how this all started. And today the title of my presentation is, what is artificial intelligence when it comes to architecture? Dr. Singh, could you please move on to the next slide? Okay, so the format of the presentation will be on your left-hand side, there is a bar, and this black sign will be moving ahead as we progress in our presentation. So you can locate yourself that at a particular point of time, we are at what position. So first point is like definition. So it is very important for this presentation that I should define some terms beforehand, so not to create confusion or such. The first point is that artificial intelligence, information and communications, cybernetics, heuristics, pattern graph theory, machine learning, that is also a subset of artificial intelligence, and computer sciences are intermingling. So it is very difficult for us to segregate or to separate these definitions. The next point is that this study attempts to define intelligence through Marvin Minsky's point of that intelligence seems to denote little more than the complex of performances which we happen to respect but do not understand. But it may be so with man as with machine that when we understand finally the structure and program, feeling of mystery and self-approbation will weaken. So it is this mystery or mysterious qualities that architects or other people seek in artificial intelligence, and this is how intelligence is being simulated in architecture today or through the century. So I'm taking this definition as a source of reference in order to define that what is intelligence and how it is being simulated. Thirdly, I'm taking architecture as a transdisciplinary field because I have an architectural background. I'm a practicing architect. So history, theory, criticism, visual communication, computer applications, environmental control systems, or environmental psychology, urban design, conservation. There is a whole breadth of subjects that we touch during our bachelor's degree in architecture. So what I believe is that architecture as well as artificial intelligence, both of these are transdisciplinary, or you can say cross-disciplinary terms that have a very wider scope, and my research exploits this narrative. Dr. Zing, could you please move to the next slide? Now, the scope of this presentation is limited to 3 of my research papers, as I said beforehand, that were published with Intelligent Buildings International Journal. The first one is, although they were published in 2019 or the later half of 2020, but in print, they became in 2022, 2021, and 2020. So the first paper is Senses, Experiences, Emotions, Memories, Artificial Intelligence as a Design instead of for a Design in Contemporary Japan. The next paper is Anthropomorphizing Artificial Intelligence, was the user-centered approach for addressing the challenges of over-automation and design understandability in smart homes. Third one is Artificial Intelligence and Contemporary Japanese Architecture. Next slide, please. So when coming to the purpose and significance of this presentation, first, the foremost, most important point that you guys will be wondering about, you will be finding a lot of breadth of ideas in this presentation. And it may seem that these ideas or these gestures are not linking with each other or have no relationship between them. So please be patient, and artificial intelligence, information and communications, cybernetics, architecture, as I said before, are intermingling terms. And my research will be going back and forth between these. So I will be knitting a lot of ideas and generating a lot of questions. So my PhD supervisor used to say that you start your paper with a question and you end your paper also with a question. This happens, but by the end of my PhD, when I published my 5th paper, those questions were somehow generating answers as well. So here in this presentation, you will be finding a lot of ideas, random ideas, and a linkage is up to you to be developed in between them. So here on this slide on your left-hand side, you see French Minister Malbrecht, Andre Malbrecht. Please, I apologize for my pronunciation of his name as it's in French. He used to display a lot of photographs, as you can see, lay down a lot of photographs on the floor. And those were random photographs, and he used to establish relationships between them, random photographs. So this is how my presentation is going to approach the narratives of AI in architecture. On your right-hand side, there are 4 photographs. Obviously, they have no relationship in between them, but through the history or philosophy of science, we can attempt to have a relationship between them. But this kind of approach I learned or experienced more when I was an academic guest at Professor Hovestadt laboratory in ETH Zürich during the course of my PhD studies. Next slide, please. So the research question that this presentation is going to attempt is, what is intelligence and how it is being simulated in the architecture of our cities, towns, districts, or even as our very own self. And the narratives that I'm going to pick are the archival ones, that is historical, theoretical, or critical perspectives. I'm not talking about the computational paradigm, for example, as in IBM building information modeling, BIM or IBM, I apologize. So how it is being implemented over there or how it is acting before, as in the background, that's not my concern. I will be presenting a number of narratives that have been presented throughout the history. And these days I'm researching also from the first century, the historical perspective that can said to be linked to that what was intelligence back then and how it was being stimulated. The same goes for this presentation as well. Next slide, please. So the very first paper that I published with Intelligent Buildings International was Artificial Intelligence and Japanese Architecture, Contemporary Japanese Architecture, Any Relationship. In this paper, my basic concern was about information utility. And this concept was floated by Junichiro Higaya, who is said to be a father of information theory or technology in Japan. And he wrote in his book in 1960s or 70s that got published in English in 1990 and was translated to many other languages as well, in a book titled as Managing in the Information Society, releasing Synergy Japanese style, that in industrial society, the modern factory consisting of machines and equipment became the societal symbol and was the production center for goods. In the information society, the information utility, and he defines it as a computer-based public infrastructure consisting of information networks and data banks, will replace the factory as the societal symbol and become the production and distribution center for information goods. So it is this information utility that I researched in greater depth for this research paper and my doctoral dissertation as well. I will be talking a lot about this information utility, and according to Masuda, it was an infrastructure that was being controlled and generated by computer activities and through networks and data banks. That we can imagine that back then they were totally a theoretical or hypothetical concepts, but these days we can experience them as well in one form or the other. Next slide, please. So in this information utility concept, what Masuda and other researchers at that time concluded was that encouraging the policy of uniqueness instead of the factory model, that is standardization, routine, and mass production, were negated, and customization was preferred from this information utility model. The second point is of spreading power in order to empower those closest to the decision instead of promoting policies that centralize power in bureaucratic institutions. As we are seeing today that social media has such a power that it can throw away your government in seconds or in days. So back then, 30 or 40 years before, this was being proposed that those will be empowered, those individualistic efforts will be empowered as compared to bureaucratic or you can say the governmental institutions. Third point is of permitting people to work at home and to live wherever they choose instead of creating policies encouraging people. Concentrate geographically at a location. So we know how in COVID scenarios we worked at home and lived wherever we wanted to. And the last point is promotion of diversity within a broad framework of shared values instead of mass culture. That is of everyone watching the same sitcoms on television. So we are experiencing these today as well. Netflix has offered us a lot of opportunities. Individualistic choices are available. Back then, they were not. Next slide, please. So here are some of those societal outcomes that I studied that Masuda proposed back in the 30 years before, and a lot of researchers as well. For example, on your upper left-hand side, you can see a carrier delivery robot that is capable of delivering from postal mail to food items to a lot of things to your doorstep. Next to it is a drone delivery robot you can see this cat sign in between over here, by Yamato Transport, and they propose to deliver postal mails to those remote islands in Japan where, unfortunately, due to earthquakes or tsunamis or any kind of disasters, by road delivery is not possible. In lower left-hand side, you can see Pepper. It is a very famous robot in Japan, and I and my sons experienced this robot delivering food items in a restaurant, and you can order or choose a menu by placing your order on this screen. Right next to it is children learning English language from robots, and then this is a photograph of an autonomous-driven vehicle that was being experimented before the Tokyo Olympics that was scheduled to be in 2020. These are some of those physicalizations in which those information utilities are presenting themselves in front of us these days. Next slide, please. So on one hand, we have a lot of benefits, but on the other, we have a lot of disadvantages as well. So in this graph that is by Frey and Osborne from the University of Oxford, we can see on the lower left-hand side, you can see those professions in architecture that have a very less probability of being automized in the coming, let's say, 3 or 4 decades. And they include architects, interior designers, even those people where brain is more included, imaginary powers or imagination is more at work. And at the end of this graph, on the right-hand side, you can see those professions that have a very high probability of being automized, such as door fixing, tile fixing, roofers, or surveying and leveling technicians. So if we say this information utility is benefiting us on the one hand, on the other, it is eliminating a lot of jobs. And these kind of things are already very much evident in Japan when you work there over in the healthcare sector or in the construction industry. By the way, construction industry, 1.23 million jobs have been eliminated already due to this kind of automation over there. But in healthcare, as more emotions or senses are involved, this pace is a little bit slow. Next slide, please. In my second research paper that I published with the same journal, I focused on Marshall McLuhan's theory. And in his theories, he says that invention or technology that he names as second nature is an extension or self-imputation of our physical bodies and nervous systems. He names as first nature, thus rendering man into a form of information and expression that exceeds him. So in one way or the other, he says that all these cities, towns, this AI, or even big data, Internet of Things are extensions of ourselves. And we are extending these from our physical bodies and nervous system. Then he defines particularly the electronic media communication technology as an expression of explicitness, a translation of one kind of knowledge into another, such as clothing, housing, cities, as I said, of our skin and bodily organs. Then the most interesting fact that I came through while reading McLuhan is that he says that these two entities, that is the second nature and the first nature, have no particular hierarchy, orderly sequence, but they are ceaselessly subsuming, obfuscating, retrieving, extending, and borrowing each other, thus hybridizing and message making. Next slide, please. In this table that I presented in my research paper, I will be reading just the first tab over here. For example, as club or hammer is a second nature, it extends the first nature of our forearm or fist. And being a citizen, we build with it. Being a nomad, we render. Being in print, it is visually available. And being in electronic media, it is tactile. So I included this a whole lot of table in my research paper, in which the second nature extends the first nature and goes to infinity literally. McLuhan just stops till the electronic media, but I believe these days AI or the other emerging technologies are extending this to infinite power. Next slide, please. So based on this concept of information utility and the second nature extending the first one, I studied a number of architects, and among them I came across the Japanese architect Toyo Ito. You must have heard his name. He's a world-renowned architect, and he has visited a lot of British as well as state universities. So he proposes that museum these days is acting as a computer, and its users, that is we, are within a particular network. It's not about what I believe is only museum, but you can see that Chinese cities are also being a kind of spaces where users or citizens are being in a network. They are knitted in a social scenario where they are being monitored 24 hours a day. So what this picture, this collage, what I can say is, displays from the left-hand side is an exhibition called as City as a Microchip that was exhibited in some museum in New York, and I forgot, sorry, the name of that museum. Next to it, by taking inspiration from this one, next to it, Toyota designed Sendai MediaTek. And the university I studied in Japan was located in Sendai, so I used to visit Sendai MediaTek a lot. Right next to it, on the third from left, is Gifu Media Cosmos, another public library in which a lot of public spaces are designed, but in a very different way or format. And fourth from left is another installation, media installation that Toyo did back in 2020 at Victoria and Albert Museum, known as Visions of Japan, in which he said that we all are saran-wrapped nomads, wandering in a city where all sorts of information, let's say, readings about weather or political news or any disaster information floats ceaselessly, and we have no control over it. In one way or the other, he was also pointing towards this information utility or the second nature extending the first one. Next slide, please. So here, in the third part of this paper, I concluded with the point that us versus Android. So we are exchanging roles, whether we are physicalized as in human features or we are transparent acting behind the scenes. So what I questioned was in this paper that ceaseless subsumption, obsolescence, retrieval, extension, as I said before, acquisition and hybridization of contemporary AI architecture is affecting our cognitive dimensions. And while art and technology museums are computers renting us as their very own components, then are we equipped to exchange our roles with them as androids? So with this point in mind, I wrote my very third paper that I'm going to discuss next slide. Next slide, please. So in my third paper, that was titled as Anthropomorphizing Artificial Intelligence, I studied literature from a number of disciplines. I read books from authors as in primary literature from the disciplines of artificial intelligence, product design or industrial engineering, human factors, ergonomics, social psychology, communication and sociology, sociological experiments that I'm going to discuss in a moment. And these were incorporated in my paper in order to study the psychology of human thought and cognition and the everyday things these things render and the designer's ability to cater these psychologies of users. Next, I attempted to address a role that a smart home can play as a leisure equipment, device, or object in our lives, granting its user the control and ease of operability they desire. So although I wrote about only smart home, but these days we are also hearing the concept of smart cities, or we can say in a decade or two we will be visiting smart museums as well. Next slide, please. So in this paper, one of the very foremost primary literature that I came across on human-computer interaction was a book by Byron Rees and Clifford Knapp that was titled as The Media Equation: How People Treat Computers, Television, and New Media Like Real People and Places. In this book, the authors argue that people do extend the same kind of etiquette and ethics to artificial things, such as to computers, to your tabloids, to your cell phone, as they do in real-life situations with real beings. For example, they pointed towards a number of characteristics, humanistic characteristics such as politeness, interpersonal distance, flattery, most importantly, judging others and ourselves, personality of characters, personality of interfaces, arousal, gender voices, etc. And they argued through very small controlled social sciences experiments, experiments that politeness, that if I'm extending politeness to my colleague or my friend, so I'm going to do the same if a computer asks the same kind of questions to me. Next slide, please. For example, the methodology that they adopted, and I picked that up and referred to in my paper, was of, for example, you can see this sentence on the right-hand side just below the example heading, that when a person asks another person about her or himself, she or he will give more positive responses than when a different person asks the same questions. That's true. We do this in our everyday life. So they replaced this person word with computer. And then they experimented and they found it true that when a computer asks a user about itself, the user will give more positive responses than when a different computer asks the same question. And then based on these two statements, what I did was I replaced this computer word with a smart home. And as it was a theoretical proposition, I didn't conduct any experiment, but it was like just a fun way of presenting your thought process in a research paper. So when I replaced this computer word with a smart home, then it became a smart home asks the user about itself, and the user will give more positive responses than when a different smart home asks the same questions. And then I came across a number of case studies being done at ETH Zürich, and they proved this fact literally, that when a home asks that how am I performing, its user says you are very good, and then when the next smart home or your neighbor's smart home asks the same question, the user gives authentic answers or the facts that they are experiencing in their real life. So this social rule still applies as people, users, subconsciously extend the same social etiquette to smart homes or smart cities, or we can say we can extend it to smart museums as well, as they do in case of other humans. This is what my third paper was based on, and I included a lot of examples on these three factors, like as in flattering, or as in praising, or as in good versus bad kind of etiquette. Next slide, please. So in my fourth paper that was published in Japan although with Taylor and Francis, but it was published with Journal of Architectural Engineering in Building Systems, if I'm not wrong, the name may vary. It was like the same kind of spaces that Masuda envisioned, like as an information utility, or as McLuhan says, as in extending the second nature extends the first nature, or as Reeves and Knapp projected in their book, that we extend the same kind of etiquette to not only our gadgets but also to our spaces as well, was more elaborated in my fourth paper. And here I argue that, for example, as an index museum that was by Patrick Geddes, and he wrote about and he studied this building located in Edinburgh, that he labeled a particular kind of a building as you can say a living being, in which Encyclopedia Graphica was proposed, an encyclopedic methodica with things and diagrams instead of words for speaking, with specimens instead of types were evident. And so museum, gallery, library, college, or any kind of function was amalgamated and transformed into a kind of an essential expression into one intelligible whole. This is the very same concept that Geddes proposed in 1890s, I believe, and next it was followed up in Centre Pompidou, in Paris, and then also in Japan World Exposition Osaka 1970. And we find these kind of spaces incorporated by architects in these kind of structures. Next slide, please. So coming back to where we started, Malbrecq's Museum Without Walls was such an attempt in which this French novelist, art theorist, and France's first Minister of Cultural Affairs proposed in his essay Le Musée Imaginaire, written in 1953, that a museum delineates all those museological entities as pure sources of information, irrespective of their color, proportion, context, function. It can be any kind of, for example, religious, and the period in which they were produced. So coming back to the same point, that these kind of information technology, such as we can say artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, or big data, are eliminating the functions that we used to have during the industrialized world, or industrial revolution, you can say, and they are proposing something newer. For example, making linkages in between those things that used to be segregated in the past. For example, as Malbrecq said in the start of the presentation, we discussed that all lot of photographs, just segregated images, no linkages in between them, but he used to establish those in his mind. And the same work that is being done in Professor Hovestadt's laboratory in Zurich, ETH. So this is what my proposal was on, and that's why I was accepted to visit that as an academic guest. This is what I propose as well, that not only my research papers, but my current research focuses on the historical narrative, speaking that how different functions are losing their meaning or lost their meaning in the past. For example, let's say from 1st century, and a number of proposals that I'm discussing are from Ramonel or by Paracelsus or by Jacques de Vaucanson, or these days, last week I was studying Charles Babbage, that how these people, while intentionally or unintentionally progressing towards information technologies, eliminated these boundaries between not only technological artifacts or information artifacts, but in information-inspired architectural spaces as well. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. That's the like Derek mentioned in the chat area is exploring a very deep meaning of intelligence, and thanks for your listening and patience. And you can type your questions in the chat area. Please feel free to test your question over there, or if you can raise your hand or type your question in the chat area. I'm sure Danny will be very happy to answer your question. And I saw one probably from this one first, the last first, is Abu Bakr Muhammad mentioned about mind-body dichotomy is only in the Western culture, but is increasingly questioned in the contemporary scientific approach towards understanding AI. And then the computational framework doesn't recognize the mind separate from the body. Do you want to comment on that, Daniel?
Yes, because if I got the question right, yes, there is a very big difference that exists between the Western world and the Eastern world. And yes, he's absolutely right that in non-Western context, there is no segregation, not even between the human mind and the body, but between the those things that we can only experience, not through our senses, through some ephemeral kind of a thing. As I'll give two examples for this. When I was in Japan, I studied Toyo Ito in very greater detail and visited his office in Tokyo also. He also talks about a lot of things that we cannot see, we cannot have access to as in physical beings, but we can experience only, or we can have intuition about only. And right, I read his philosophical theories as well about this, and it all comes from Zen architecture or Buddhism. The same goes with the Islamic world as well, that there are a lot of things that are not explainable through words. the same I experienced, as I said, in Raman theories, that he was inspired by some Islamic philosophers back in 11th or 12th centuries. And he used to say the same kind of things, that all these things are intermingled and it is not necessary to be like in a confinements of human mind or body or any kind of restraints. He used to have this kind of thing, and this thing is being exhibited in the Western world or being promoted in the Western world right now. We can see that in a lot of exhibitions that are happening these days. So they are approaching the global south in this way. I'm not sure, but yes, this question is right.
Okay, yeah, and can you see the chat text at all, Daniel? I
Sorry,
think.
could you please say it again?
Yeah, can you see the chat area at all?
Yes. I have this chat area on my right hand side.
Yeah, probably I can close this sharing, and then you can see the chat area. I think as Abubakar mentioned, is responding to Derek's question about the interpretation of AI, and which is accounts for both brain and mind. Is really physical, and something the metaphysical is something is very abstract thinking. And Derek also mentioned about monist and dualist view, and how do we account for feelings?
Sorry, thanks for cutting you. Yes, that's a very interesting topic. And when I was in a conference at the University of New South Wales back in 2019, there we debated the same thing, that how to synchronize or harmonize this notion of segregation, let's say, between the Western and the Eastern world, where these kind of views are being amalgamated again. Again, I will be giving the example of, let's say, the founder architect, modern architect in Japan, Kenzo Tange, or the British architects such as Cedric Price or the cybernetician Gordon Pask, that their views also somehow are about like how these things, these unsaid or unexperienced things can be physicalized in the physical world. And Toyo Ito attempted these through neon signs, he attempted to find those notions around him in a highly industrialized city of Tokyo back in 60s, 70s, or 80s, when there was a higher economic growth and skyscrapers were popping up, as you can correct me, happening right now in China, in Beijing or Shanghai. So you can find answers to these kind of questions in your surroundings as well, and then there remains a philosophical debate about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, the separation of mind, flow of hormones, and where's origin of consciousness. That is also very interesting debate. I think Richard Bowman asked about predictions of sportsmen. They can be ready at the right time and the right places. Yeah, interesting.
Yes, and Dr. Singh, I can say, like, if the listeners have any question, they can approach me through my email address that is mentioned on all the research papers. They are all publicly available. So you can access my papers through my name, and you can, I would love to hear criticism on my presentation as well, because what I believe is I'm in a very early career stages, and I'm establishing myself as a researcher in AI and the subfield it tangles with. So maybe some of my answers will be superficial, not in greater depth, but if you approach me through email, I would be referring you some books, or I would be mentioning you or referring you to some professors who are more knowledgeable than me, far knowledgeable in these kind of philosophical questions.
Yeah, there is also a question by Michael's ask whether your slides will be available after the seminar. Do you mind to share your slides later on, or they can email you asking for a copy of your slides?
I believe that these slides are just superficial, or they just point towards some basic points in my papers. So it would be better if you can read my papers. They are in more greater detail. So all of this stuff is published already in my papers, and they are already accessible. So instead of going for just superficial knowledge, please just consult the papers, and you will be finding a greater discussion over there.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, all the 3 papers published in Intelligent Building International.
Intelligent Building,
great.
yes. Yes, enjoy.
Derek, do you want to say something?
Oh, yes, I was very interesting, Danyal. We could talk for hours, I think, on many aspects of what you've spoken about. But at the end of the day, in our buildings, it's very important to look at how people react to the environment around them. And now we have many more measurement techniques that we can use the human being as a sort of measurement point in the environment, not just the atmosphere and the materials and so on. So how people feel, because we learn then that how they feel in the building is a great motivator for them in doing their actual work, the thing they're going to do in the building. And I wonder how you feel about the role of the user, the centric user design idea of understanding how people respond to their environment.
Thank you so much, Professor Clemens, for this question. It's a very interesting one. And again, it has multiple answers, but I will try to answer it in the Western context, where we say that a user is one who defines all sorts of notions around him or her. So it is the user who defines all this, and all these technologies are in self foundationally nothing. So as I gave example of Patrick Getty's museum in Edinburgh back in 1890s, he used to say that it is the user who defines a particular place, and it is a user who tells us that what he wants or what he wants to do or how he will be utilizing or defining a particular technology, particularly in architecture as well. So it's all based on the user, as in the Western context. But if you go for the Eastern one, and we say that no, the user is not the sole authority in charge of her or his surroundings, then a lot of debate comes in, and that's very difficult. But because I tried to study some philosophers in this context, and they just went out of this. I wasn't able to understand them thoroughly, but yes, I'm trying to. So.
Thank you.
Sorry, I apologize because maybe I'll be answering in some other context, and your question will be some other thing. But I'll try my best to answer as approximately as possible. Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, read your paper then. It's more interesting analysis over there. It's very deep, kind of just as Derek mentioned, discussion about the intelligence, and then we talk about artificial intelligence and intelligent building. So what is opposite to artificial intelligence of the intelligent building? What is inert aspect of intelligence of intelligent building? Do you mind to expand a little bit more on the biomimicry or nature-based type of intelligence in your research, or you have kind of avoided that stream?
Dr. Singh, I have not touched this kind of a topic up till now in my research, because I'm more focused towards like how intelligence has been stimulated over the centuries. My stance is that intelligence was present over the centuries in architecture, and whatever was built as based on McLuhan's theories was our very own extension. Because nothing was there to be built on its own. So it was like built by human beings and they were intelligent, so they were transferring their intelligence to their building. So for now, my stance has been, and I'm researching the archival records at different universities regarding like how those thinkers, or you can say those technology makers, those gadget makers, envisage that what the intelligence will be in the future as projected or portrayed with their artifacts. This is my research right now. So I would love to, but in later stages of my career.
Thank you. Many thanks. Are there any other questions?
I will tell you what you think. The intention please. With all this, there's a lot
We couldn't hear clearly now. Couldn't hear clearly, but Derek put this paper, INBN Intelligent Building International Journal, issue 1, 14, 2022. Yeah, okay.
One month alone, maybe. We don't even remember the time before then, any millions of people. But we continue to the second as being from one constant in public life. And therefore, the change from them is a change that is fundamental in the way that they see events of kingdom and in the way that they see the shape of the society. Others will be reflecting on the change of monarchy, seeing Charles III, and wondering what that will bring. And Sir David Attenborough will remove Robert Hartman, and Sir David, if I may say so, you were born within a few weeks of it.
Okay, I couldn't hear it clearly. Can you hear it clearly, Daniel? No.
No, Dr. Singh, it would be better if he can type this up for us. And
No, I couldn't hear clearly. Okay, that's great. I think the CPC organizer recorded this video, and it will be made available to you through CPC web, the new website, and also will be available on YouTube as well. And the paper, I think you mentioned already over there, and probably you can put a link to the paper over there. Okay, any other questions?
Dr. Singh, I would request the listener, if he is able to, he can message me or he can type in the chat, because we are not being able to hear him clearly.
No, I couldn't hear anything, no. Yeah, if you couldn't hear anything, but yeah, please feel free. Yeah, Derek, I saw you raise a hand, but
Yes, well, it's near the time now to finish, but I just wanted to say to Danyal, thank you very much for a most interesting paper, and we look forward to collaborating with you further via the journal and also via the IBG group, because you're raising a lot of problems that often are glossed over. And I keep on saying that as our vocabulary increases in our industry, we're using words without perhaps thinking of their deeper meaning. And I'm just tracking as you're speaking. You mentioned the transdisciplinary nature of architecture. And I think that is true. The interconnections between us all, we're too pigeonholed, I think, nowadays with being an engineer or being an architect. And I was thinking of Vitruvius, and you laid out the education for the architect, transdisciplinary architect. And of course, when you read Vitruvius, you see very much that architects or engineers, he didn't distinguish so much between them in those days, should be educated in a wide span of subjects to cope with the various social, cultural and technical problems that architecture arises. And if you then go forward to Sir Ove Arup, when he was setting up his firm Arup, the one word that he emphasized so much was collaboration. And, you know, the collaborations, of course, because he saw the differentiations made between architects and engineers as being a little bit artificial. And so you can see we're going full circle. We've gone through the Victorian age of specialization and separate institutions and so on. But I wonder if you feel we do that a little bit too much, and there should be much more interaction across the sectors. The transdisciplinary nature of what we do should be brought out more than what we actually do. We tend to go into little groups of separate groups rather than working together. But anyway, I don't want to hold up the proceeding. That's something we can continue to talk about. But from my point of view, having been involved in your journal papers, thank you very, very much for this afternoon. It's so interesting. And I'll hand back now to Jan for conclusion.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clemens Krom, for your suggestions, and you have always been a mentor. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be in contact with you.
Yeah, definitely keep in touch.
Yeah, sure, Doctor.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Look forward to see you again. Bye-bye.